Imagine this. You go to sleep on Thursday, October 4th, 1582. Nothing unusual happens. People eat dinner, say prayers, close their doors, and blow out their candles like any other night. But when they wake up, it is no longer October 5th. It is Friday, October 15th, 1582. 10 full days are gone. No earthquake, no war, no explosion in the sky. Just a silent jump in time. And the strangest part is, this actually happened in real history. Not in a movie. Not in a conspiracy theory. This was an official decision made by governments, enforced by law, and recorded in real documents. In some countries, people literally lived through a month where 10 calendar dates never existed. And that raises a question that instantly hooks the human brain. How can days disappear from history? To understand this, we have to go back to the calendar system used for centuries before the Gregorian calendar. It was called the Julian calendar, introduced by Julius Caesar in 46 BC. The Julian calendar was a brilliant idea for its time. It created a simple rule. A year has 365 days, and every 4 years, you add one extra day, a leap year. So the average year length becomes 365.25 days. And for a long time, that seemed accurate enough. But nature has a small secret. The Earth does not take exactly 365.25 days to orbit the Sun. The real solar year is about 365.2422 days. That difference is tiny. Only about 11 minutes per year. But here is the danger of small errors. Small errors don't stay small. They accumulate. Year after year. Century after century. Now let's do the scary math in a human way. If you lose about 11 minutes per year, then after 100 years, you lose almost 18 hours. After about 130 years, you lose roughly 1 full day. So by the time Europe reached the 1500s, the calendar had drifted badly. Seasons were slowly sliding. Spring was no longer matching the same calendar dates it used to. And this wasn't just an astronomy problem. It became a religious and political crisis. Because one of the most important events in Christianity, Easter, is based on the position of the sun and moon. And the church noticed something disturbing. The calendar was no longer aligned with the sky. The date of Easter was slowly becoming wrong. So by the late 1500s, the world had a choice. Either accept that the calendar would keep drifting forever, or fix it. In 1582, Pope Gregory XIII approved a major reform. This reform created what we now call the Gregorian calendar. But to fix the drift instantly, they had to do something shocking. They had to remove the extra days that had built up over centuries. So the order was given. After October 4th, the next day would be October 15th. No October 5th. No October 6th. No October 7th. All the way up to October 14th. Gone. Deleted. Erased from the calendar. And yes, people were confused. Some were angry. Some thought it was a trick. Some even believed their lives were being shortened. But governments and churches enforced it. Because this wasn't about stealing time. This was about repairing time. And once this happened, the world entered a new era. A calendar that most of humanity still uses today. Now here's the surprising part. The Gregorian calendar didn't just delete 10 days and call it a day. It also fixed the root cause of the problem. Because if the world kept using the old Julian leap year rule, the calendar would drift again. So the reform introduced a smarter leap year system. In the Julian calendar, the rule was simple. Every 4 years is a leap year. But that creates a year length of 365.25 days. And the Earth's real orbit is 365.2422 days. So the Gregorian calendar needed to be just slightly shorter. Not by hours. Not by days. By minutes. So they designed a rule that feels weird at first, but is actually genius. Here is the Gregorian leap year rule in plain human language. If the year is divisible by 4, it's a leap year. But if the year is divisible by 100, it is not a leap year. Unless the year is divisible by 400, then it is a leap year again. So, 1600 was a leap year. 1700 was not. 1800 was not. 1900 was not. 2000 was a leap year. 2100 will not be. This rule removes 3 leap days every 400 years. That tiny correction makes the Gregorian calendar extremely accurate. So accurate, in fact, that it only drifts by about 1 day every 3000 plus years. In other words, the Gregorian calendar is one of the most successful scientific software updates humanity ever made. But here's where the story becomes even more dramatic. The Gregorian calendar was introduced by the Pope. And in the 1500s, Europe was not united. Europe was divided. Because this was the era of the Protestant Reformation. Many Protestant countries saw the new calendar as a Catholic power move. So even though the science was correct, politics and religion made it controversial. Some countries adopted it immediately. Others refused for decades. Some refused for centuries. So the world entered a strange time period where 2 different calendars existed at the same time. Imagine how confusing that would be. A letter written in one country might have a date that was 10 days different in another country. Trade, travel, and diplomacy became a mess. Now here's something most people don't know. The famous missing 10 days happened in 1582. But later, other countries had to skip even more days. Because the longer you waited to switch, the more the calendar drifted. So the missing days increased. By the 1700s, the difference became 11 days. By the 1800s, it became 12 days. By the 1900s, it became 13 days. That means in some places, the world didn't just lose 10 days. They lost 11. Or 12. Or 13. For example, Britain and its colonies switched in 1752. They went to sleep on September 2. And woke up on September 14. Russia switched in 1918. They jumped forward by 13 days. So depending on where you lived, history literally had different dates. And that leads to the next big question. If the calendar was different in different countries, what does that do to historical events? Because if you think about it, even famous birthdays and wars could have 2 dates. Once you learn that countries use different calendars at the same time, history suddenly becomes confusing. Because it means something unbelievable. 2 people living on the same day could write 2 different dates. And both would be correct. For example, in the 1600s and 1700s, Spain, Italy, and Portugal were already using the Gregorian calendar. But Britain was still using the Julian calendar. Russia was still using the Julian calendar. Many other regions were mixed. So a treaty signed in one country might be dated differently in another. Even wars, royal events, and scientific discoveries can appear on different dates depending on which calendar is being used. That's why historians sometimes label dates like this. Old style, OS, equals Julian calendar. New style, NS, equals Gregorian calendar. So when you read history and see 2 dates for the same event, it's not a mistake. It's the calendar split. Now let's talk about the most emotional part of this story. Because when governments announced that people would lose days, many ordinary people didn't understand the science. And honestly, you can't blame them. Imagine being a farmer, a worker, or a shopkeeper in the 1500s. You don't know astronomy. You don't know Earth's orbital period. All you hear is, tomorrow will not be tomorrow. So some people became suspicious. They feared that rulers were stealing time. Some worried that rent would still be due. Some worried their wages would be cut. Some even feared that their lives were literally being shortened. Because to the human mind, losing days feels like losing life. And even though the truth was scientific, the emotional reaction was completely human. You may have heard a famous line, "Give us our 11 days." This story is often told about Britain's calendar change in 1752. The idea is that people protested in the streets because they thought the government stole 11 days from their lives. Now here's the honest truth. This story is probably exaggerated. It became popular later, partly because it's dramatic and easy to remember. There may have been confusion and anger, yes. But the idea of huge riots purely because of missing days is not strongly supported the way people imagine. However, even if the riots were exaggerated, the fear behind the story was real. Because whenever governments change something as fundamental as time, people feel threatened. And the calendar isn't just numbers. It controls religious holidays, farming cycles, wages and rent, birthdays and anniversaries, official legal records. So changing the calendar was not a small update. It was a full rewrite of reality. Now let's make this real with an example. One of the most famous calendar confusions involves William Shakespeare. History books often say Shakespeare died on April 23, 1616. But the problem is, England was still using the Julian calendar at that time. Meanwhile, Spain was using the Gregorian calendar. And another famous writer, Miguel de Cervantes, is also recorded as dying around the same date. This created a popular claim. Shakespeare and Cervantes died on the same day. But in real time, they did not die on the exact same day. It only looks that way because the two countries were using different calendars. So you can literally say, some historical figures have dates that appear to overlap, even when they didn't. And this is why the missing days are not just a fun fact. They changed how history is recorded forever. By now, you might be thinking, if this change was so controversial, how did the Gregorian calendar eventually become the world standard? The answer is simple. Because science doesn't care about politics. Over time, the Gregorian calendar proved to be more accurate, more stable, and more useful for trade, navigation, and global coordination. As the world became more connected, having different calendars became a serious problem. Imagine trying to run international shipping, diplomacy, or business when your dates don't match. So slowly, country by country, the world accepted the Gregorian calendar. Some did it quickly. Others resisted. But in the end, the logic won. Because the calendar is not just a tradition. It's a tool. And the best tool eventually spreads. Another surprising fact is this. Even though the Gregorian calendar began in 1582, some countries didn't fully adopt it until the 1900s. Russia switched in 1918. Greece officially switched in the 1920s. And some religious communities still use older calendar systems for certain holidays today. So when people say, the Gregorian calendar is modern, they forget something. It's not modern at all. It is more than 400 years old. It became global not because it was new, but because it was accurate. And that is one of the most fascinating lessons in human history. Sometimes, the most powerful revolutions are silent. No armies. No battles. Just a change in the way we count days. Before we end, there's one more missing time mystery most people don't know. And it's not about missing days. It's about a missing year. In the calendar system used in history books, 1 BC is followed immediately by 1 AD. There is no year zero. So technically, year zero is missing from the traditional historical timeline. This happened because the BC/AD system was created centuries later by scholars who weren't using zero the way modern mathematics does. Astronomers sometimes use a different system where 1 BC becomes year 0, 2 BC becomes year -1. But in normal history, year 0 does not exist. So the calendar doesn't just have missing days. It also has a missing year. So now, when someone says, "How can days disappear from history?" you know the answer. They didn't vanish by magic. They were removed because humans discovered something important. Time is not just a feeling. Time is not just tradition. Time is a measurement. And when your measurement is wrong, your entire civilization slowly drifts away from reality. In 1582, humanity faced that drift. And instead of ignoring it, we fixed it. We rewrote the calendar. We deleted 10 days. And the world moved forward. So yes, people went to sleep on October 4 and woke up on October 15. Not because time was stolen, but because time was corrected. And that might be one of the most incredible moments in all of human history.
Subscribe Info Beyond Borders now for more mind-blowing knowledge.